Okay, so you're taking a break from DJing or music entirely?
Definitely only DJing.
Okay.
Because I love music. I love creating music. I love working with artists. I love the act of creation, but I felt that being on the road and touring was making music feel like work rather than something that I was excited about or like pure expression or it felt being in the studio making music right here is like my happy place. And the touring was like taking away from that because my happy place started becoming my goals place. Like I need to create music that's going to do well on Spotify or that's going to get signed on labels or that's strategically going to get me into this festival or whatever. And then I started losing sight of this where like it wasn't about authentically expressing like what I was trying to say. It was about being goal oriented. And the way that ties to touring is this is like the heart of why I'm going on this break. The touring was so stressful and it was taking up so much emotional space that I didn't have enough emotional space to reflect on how I was actually feeling about things. And I was getting so caught up in the mental stress, anxiety, planning, goal orienting, and all that. A few months ago, I was talking to a friend, and she said, "Hey, Atish, like, how are you feeling?" And I said, "I honestly don't even know how to answer that question, how I feel right now, because I am so busy and I am so stressed. I don't even have room to think about how I feel." And at the time, I just said it like it was a matter of fact thing. But now that I'm in this like mental health break or hiatus from the stress of the road, I'm like, I can't believe I was saying something like that and not even reflecting deeply on how problematic that is. I don't remember what your question is, but I went down a long winding path.
That's great. Well, this is what I refer to as the preamble.
Okay.
This is as we're sort of dancing our way into the moment where I welcome you back to the show.
Gotcha. Wait, has the podcast started?
Ish.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So the way that it works is that we talk a bit and we kind of like ramp up, and then when I'm in the editing process, I usually include, if the ramp feels like a great ramp into our conversation, I use it, or I just cut right to the welcome back to the show. And this is the interesting question that comes out right out the gate, and it's the question before I even welcome you to the show because it's so alive in this moment is music fun now that you're taking a break?
Oh yeah. It's like so fun.
Okay, we'll go deep into that, but that's that's kind of setting the table. So basically, welcome back to Life as a Festival.
I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
I saw that you were taking a break from DJing, and I was like, oh, this is a great time. I think it's been like 4 or 5 years since we spoke in the before time. And I've often thought that the idea of making your life feel like a festival would be to have a career that is creative, and what more festival career can you think of than being a DJ? I mean, being a festival producer is even like, oh, wait, that's cool. But like being a DJ, you're like front and center. You're the person that people are coming to see. You're like, people are buying tickets because your name is there. They see your name and they want to buy tickets. That's a great feeling. So I think a lot of people who go to festivals and are like, God, I wish I could live this. Imagine that to become a DJ would be the experience of creating a life like a festival. And you and I both know that that's not true. When you were posting that you were taking a break and that you were, in the way that you tend to be very open and trusting of your audience to share yourself, I thought, God, what a great time to have a deeper conversation about what it means to have a creative career, a creative life, and to make wise choices for the fullness of your life, even if that seems a little counterintuitive to our successism as a culture. So that's why I wanted to have you back on my show. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Let's get into it.
Okay, so as we were just kind of chatting and getting started, I was curious, and we'll touch right back to it. You are now on a break. You are no longer DJing. There's a couple of different pieces that go into your brand. So, label boss, producer, DJ, mentor. What of the suite of things that you have associated with your career are you not doing right now, and what are you continuing to do?
I only dropped out the touring. I still co-run the label with my label partner.
Except you're going to Ibiza this weekend.
This weekend was it was so hard. I made an exception for this one.
Everyone makes an exception for Ibiza. That's the thing. You're like, well, yes, I'm not doing ketamine anymore, but Ibiza.
Yeah, no, I know this is definitely like contradictory, but even my communications, like I'm on this like mental health break, but this is the one exception, and then it really starts after that. But I've just eliminated touring from the equation. I'm still making music, still mentoring, still running the label. All those things, none of those things really stress me out or drain me.
Touring is stressful.
It is stressful. And I think for me, it was definitely a manageable amount of stress for a majority of it. And I loved it. I think the thing that like really amplified the stress level was after having a kid. And I think in the first podcast, we like talked about me like and my wife planning on having kids and like how am I going to do this? And like now I'm like in it. And for me and the type of father that I want to be and the type of husband that I want to be, it's like really hard touring, being a great husband, being a great father. I have not figured out how to do all those things in harmony.
What is the type of father that you would like to be?
Present, and not directly from the part of it is the amount of time that I have, but actually I don't feel like it was massively problematic. Like, okay, I was gone a lot of weekends, but you know, Monday through Friday I'm home helping get him ready for school, and I'm home on the, you know, after he comes home from school, like after 5-6 p.m. it's like family time. But the weekends, it would be things like when I would come home, like Sunday night or Monday morning, he would just like tell me like how much he missed me. Or when I tell him I'm going on a trip, my son would just tell me he doesn't want me to go on trips. So like there's those things. And then just like missing out on things, like most of the action happens on weekends, like taking him to skateboard practice or going to family get-togethers.
How old is he?
He's 3.5.
Skateboard practice?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's insane how quickly these toddlers learn to skateboard.
That's the through line of the podcast. That's our subtext.
It's just being present for the not just like number of hours, but for like the really meaningful moments when a lot of the fun stuff is happening, or getting to take him to amusement parks, or even like small. It's like stuff that might sound small to people who don't have kids, but like, oh, it's fall time, let's go like pumpkin picking, you know? And it's like, well, I want to do that with my 3.5-year-old son because that's really special.
Yeah, but I got to rage in Ibiza. So.
Yeah. And, you know, it's not that I love most of my gigs I love. And we'll talk, maybe we can spend some time talking about the gigs I don't love. But I love gigging. I love touring. I love airplanes. I love airports. But it's the inability to be home for a lot of those meaningful moments. And then adjacent to that or related to that is when I would come home, I would just be really tired. So even though I'm home or I'm like with my son or with my wife, I just like wouldn't have energy to do things in the way that I do right now. And even if I'm home for a weekend, you know, I wasn't traveling every weekend, I would just rather be home sitting around doing nothing than going pumpkin picking or doing something like that. So to answer your question, the type of father I want to be is one who has energy to be a father to a 3.5-year-old, and one who's around to enjoy the moments of what many parents of older kids tell me are like the best years. Yeah. And, sorry, we'll pause there.
Go ahead.
And I think those same things, even though you asked what type of father do I want to be, I think those same questions apply to what type of husband do I want to be. I want to be present in the same ways, in similar ways for my son that I am for my wife.
Last time we spoke, we talked about why you DJ and what matters to you. And I remember you talking about the idea of being understood as an artist and being seen and connecting with people, and that was a motivating factor for you. And another piece of that conversation, we spoke about the difficulty of always wanting to have your best night when really, if it's your best night, there's only one, right? So you're constantly striving to be better and to perform in a certain way. I often think of the idea of like making it. When you have a goal, you have a vision of what it means to make it.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm this kind of DJ playing these kind of gigs, I've made it. And then you find that when you're in your career and you're achieving new goals, then it changes. And I'm not as big as this DJ, or I'm not as big as this podcaster, or whatever it is. Do you think that you've made it as a DJ according to your dreams?
That's such a great question, because I think before I went on the break, and like when I was in the thick of it, I felt constantly that, there's like so much more. Like I see like those other DJs, they're playing bigger festivals and stages than me, or my fees like just before the pandemic were like this big, and now they're like 20% less. And it's like, well, I know like there was this like constant like comparing mode to how much better it could be, or what other people are doing. And then now, kind of unwinding when I'm in this zone, I don't know how this is going to sound, but it's almost like I have already made it and done it. And it's
I kind of feel that. I actually kind of feel that about you.
I did it. Not that there's not more things to do, but like it's kind of like, what's the next mountain?
I talked to Android Jones about fatherhood, and it was also early on in the podcast. And I remember him talking about how it's like, you think that driving your motorcycle around Tibet, like that's the peak. But for him, it's fatherhood. It's having a family. It's like, and his line was like, that's the headliner. The rest of it's warm up. That's the headliner. And I think it's interesting how we age and our goals change and what we want to put our energy into. And I think that there's a kind of, I bet you could graph it, but like for a while, what you want is novel experiences. Mm-hmm. And then at a certain point, and I think it has to do with, the system of your body, conserving what you have becomes your priority. Yeah. So first it's like go and get the thing and find the partner and make the money and have the big dreams. And then at a certain point, our age.
41 here, just for context.
42, but I pretend to be how I look. And then there's a moment where it starts to be like, well, what feels really good is to cultivate the things that we have that we love and we care about. Your relationship to your wife, your child, those moments of picking up pumpkins at the skate park, that whole vibe. And it seems like this decision to take a break at the moment is calculated in that context. How much of making a decision to pause, and take this question how you will, how much of it was like a logical calculation, if I do this, then this will happen? And how much of it was just a feeling of like, I need to do this. This is not working.
So the way that this break came to be was some things had come up in my therapy around how I like wasn't in tune with my emotions, and how I need to do some work on that, but I'm like so stressed I don't have room for it. So that was like one thing that I had been like working on like the last, what you could say narrowly the last few months, but really I think all of my therapy since definitely before our first podcast. There was that. I went on vacation with my family, and my mom like wrote me this long email and just saying like, what's going on with you right now? You seem tired. You seem burnt out. Like you didn't have energy. My manager at the time, we had like our regular weekly meeting, and he's like, Atish, like, is everything okay? You seem tired. Like, are you burnt out? My booking agent, she had also shared that like Atish she had like come over one day and she's like, man, you seem like tired, blah, blah, blah. So, and then there might have been one other person. All these people around me within like a 2-week span had said something to me Like, are you okay? You know, and I thought I was okay, and obviously I thought I was okay because was not in tune with how I was feeling. But I the it was was it a logical decision? Was it a feelings decision? It was like a trusting the people around me decision. It was like, oh, these people are telling me that like I'm not doing okay or that I seem tired or burnt out or whatever. Like let me take that seriously. And then one day my manager, he said like, do you want to take a break? And then before he even finished the question, it just like something triggered in my brain. It's like, oh yeah, can we start yesterday? And then so that's where the feeling came in before he even finished the question. And he was like, I was thinking maybe you start in like January, you know, maybe December. I'm like, no. I'm like, now. Let's just do it right now. That thought hadn't even crossed my mind.
Yeah, no Halloween gigs, I guess.
Oh man, I'm like trying to be real. So Ibiza's happening. I'm trying to be really disciplined.
Are you going to do a Halloween gig?
No.
Are you sure? It's New York, spooky season, vampire weekend. Are you sure?
I already said it was such a big offer, and I'm not making money now. I mean, I'm making some from mentorship, but it's like the hardest thing about this break is that like I make 90% of my income from touring, and ironically or contradictorily, one of the things that stresses me out about touring so much is the obsession with money and fees. So that's a thing we can explore, that contradiction there. But yeah, no, the Halloween gig, it was like a big fee. Probably would have been my biggest fee all year. Massive stage, high profile. But I'm like, I have to be disciplined about this. Like Ibiza's the last one, and I have to be disciplined. Otherwise, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, no, I am not playing a Halloween, and it pains me, but I'm also so proud of myself for saying no. And I said no to a New Year's gig. Halloween and New Year's are the highest paying gigs of the year. And it pains me. It pains my wallet, but I'm proud of myself for saying no.
Do you envision a future where you have a kind of balance where you are taking those bigger gigs and you're doing less gigs overall? Or, I mean, is it about trying to ultimately strike that balance? Because I understand that this is maybe indefinite, but likely temporary. What's going on? What is the goal of the break? Just in I understand that there's a lot around what you need in this moment and your family and your mental health. But what's your goal for the break in terms of your career? Because you're going to take a dip to a certain degree. Totally. I mean, there's going to be, you know, how people relate to you. And I don't know exactly like the mechanics of this, like if it's even realistic that you take that much of a dip in it, but it seems like there'll be some kind of a dip and like you're sacrificing something. What in this moment would you say is the long-term relationship to career that you imagine coming out of this?
Long-term relation to music career or life, like the career that I choose?
Well, let's go with in this moment touring. Like, could you take the Halloween and the New Year's, but maybe like not do, you know, a whole on the road kind of like, where would you like to land with that?
Where I would like to land, there's the utopia state, and then there's the like realistic best case outcome. The utopia state is like, I get paid $50,000 a gig and I play like, you know, 6 gigs a year. I don't think that's realistic, but that's where I would like to be. But I think like the realistic, like best case scenario would be I come back to touring like 6 months or a year from now, and I'm traveling like 1 weekend a month, one weekend every couple months or whatever. That would be like a nice place to be. But the reason I'm doing this break and taking my time away from touring is because when I am traveling, it's so all-consuming, I can't think about other things. I'm not going to make enough money traveling once every 8 weeks from touring in a realistic outcome. You know, I'm probably going to take a dip in fees after all this. So I need to create space for myself, one, to have fun and just to unwind and de-stress. But I need to create space for myself to figure out how am I going to like make money in a way that doesn't require me being on the road so much. I don't know what the answer to that is yet. But to answer your question, that is what the purpose of this is, to de-stress, to connect with myself emotionally, connect with my wife, connect with my son, and create enough room for me to even think about what else I might want to do in life.
So,
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going deeper into it. No, I mean, and also the question isn't immediately answerable because you've just started this, and I'm just kind of I'm trying to get a sense of where your head's at around this. In part because what's running in the back of my head in this whole conversation is our listeners who will be fans of my show and fans of you, and people who are all having their own relationship to creative work. Most of my listeners are involved in creative work or would like to be, and I think many of your listeners as well. And creative work is so inspiring because you're like, oh, I could have this office job, or I could be in the service industry or the gig economy. Like, I want to be creating. But then you get to a point and it's like, is the creation still satisfying in that way, or is it losing its heart? And then what do I do? That's kind of what's been running the whole conversation for me.
Related to this, it's once I quit my software engineering job at Facebook in 2015 to do music full time. I was so proud of that. Rightfully so. That's like a milestone in an artist's career, to be able to sustain yourself through your art, for money. And then I started doing my mentorship a few years later, and a lot of my focus on what I was teaching was how you make that jump, And now, like, the chapter I'm in my life right now is, how can I have a day job?
Now you got to teach people how to make the jump back.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to go back. I want a day job. Or maybe not 40 hours.
Would you go back to Meta?
I don't want something. No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I don't know if like software.
If Mark Zuckerberg, if you're listening, no.
I mean, look, if Meta wants to pay me like $200K a year for me to do like 10 hours a week of work, then sure. No, I want to figure out a way that I make money from something that is not my art, or that money from something that doesn't require me to feel like I'm compromising my art in order for me to live a life to the level of comfortability that I want. So I'm calling it a day job. I don't know what it is, but I have come full circle. And now even like to my mentees, I'm advising like, wait as long as you can before making the jump to going full time. Because once you depend on your art to make money, there are so many opportunities. Every artist is different. There are so many opportunities to compromise yourself on what you're trying to do. And once you start compromising yourself as an artist, it's a slippery slope. And then eventually you get to a certain point where it's like, what am I actually saying to the world? Who am I? Like, this is what is the purpose of art if it's not expressed authentically? That's like my thesis in life. And the money just like muddies that ocean a lot. In my life, it has, at least because of the demands of having a kid.
Yeah, I remember in our first conversation, we actually opened the conversation by talking about a gig that you took that was a corporate gig, and you felt very mistreated in that environment, and you were like, fuck this, I'm not taking I'm not taking gigs for money. I'm not going to do it. And at that time, and I think this was 2018, 2019, you were very much like, no, like I'm thriving, and I'm thriving playing the way that I want.
I was in pure artist mode.
Yeah, pure artist mode. And then when you made your announcement about the fact that you were taking a step back, one of the things that you cited was that you were taking gigs for money that weren't right for you. Now, have any of them been as bad as the gig that you cried after?
No.
Have you cried after any of these gigs? You have to tell me, because we're on a vulnerability podcast.
Yeah, no, I would be more than happy to tell you if I did cry. It's possible. I didn't cry, but let's peel that one layer too. I wonder if one of the reasons why I didn't cry is because I was just so out of tune with how I was feeling.
It's even worse than the crying.
Yeah, the crying would have been a good thing. At least I had an outlet for my how I felt about it. But like, it was just like, it was like, okay, this was soul sucking. This was terrible. It was blah blah blah. All these things. But then I'm like, oh, but like, look how much I got paid. And it's like, that version of me in the podcast all those years ago, that was not me. When you talk about the slippery slope.
That was one of your main points of the whole show, is like the authenticity.
Yeah.
And I like what you say about slippery slope with authenticity, because I think any category of integrity it's the small piece, it's the little ones that make the big ones straightforward. So it's like lifting weights or whatever. It's like when your body's fit, you can do the hard stuff. If your integrity, if you are doing the right thing on the little things that you could, like you don't put the shopping cart away kind of thing, like the little things. If you're doing all the little things, then when a big thing comes, it's pretty straightforward. You know right and wrong. And I think what happens with a lot of people is that it's the slippery slope, the little compromise, and then something bigger will happen, and it's like, okay, I'll cut the corner here, and then that's when you start to get a real distance from yourself. And I feel like I know you reasonably well. We don't hang out regularly, but I know you reasonably well. And I think that it sounds like part of your move of integrity, part of your correcting mechanism is actually taking a step back and being like, oh, I don't like who I'm being. This isn't me. This isn't what I'm aspiring to be. I need to, do a course correction here.
Yeah, you nailed it. It was the slippery slope. And yeah, this is a course correction. And it made me rethink, like, what is the purpose of being art or being an artist? It's like, and just to be clear, it's not like every single gig was a shit gig. It was like maybe even just like 20% of the gigs being that way. And I guess I'm sensitive enough where those would get to me. Or having a string of like 3 of those gigs in a row would be bad. I still had so many other great gigs. I just want to set the tone. It wasn't like I was in hell. But it was just enough where, coming to a point where I was, pure artist mode, very, very resound in my integrity and morals to even 20% letting it go. You where was I? And now I feel like I'm just like back in tune with myself and what I'm communicating on social media, or the way I think about what I'm going to make in the studio, or the way I talk to people, the way I like shop for clothes. It's like it is. Now that I feel like in tune with myself and my emotions, and I still have more work to do, I feel like I'm like a better version of myself. I feel like I'm the version of myself that I try to espouse. I'm the version of myself that I want to be. Yeah.
Let's talk about the version of yourself that you espouse. One of the things that we spoke about last time was social media, and that conversation really gave me an insight into the DJ lifestyle. That I'll have you know. You'll appreciate this. I have a friend who became successful pretty quickly coming out of the pandemic. He was a dentist and became like a pretty successful DJ. And I have had conversations with him based on stuff you told me.
Okay.
Where I'm like, hey, so what's going on with your sleep and your drug use and like your travel stuff? And we talked about DJ heroics, and so there were things that you shared with me. So it's like it's been on my mind. And one of the things we talked about that really opened my eyes was how DJing is in itself this constant validation experience, because you're selecting music based on the crowd, based on their response. And if you have a good night, it's extremely uplifting because it's like, ooh, I got the next track. This is really working. And if it's not working, and maybe like a stand-up comic, like they're not laughing or they're not responding, you're getting immediate feedback. And what you had shared with me, which I found so insightful, and I've spoken to a lot of people about this, is like, in the same way that social media is this constant, am I good enough? Do you like me? That DJing has that too. And since you need social media to promote yourself, you're kind of compounding this constant presentation of self. And do you like me? Do you not like me? And there's a lot I want to talk about in this vein, but I'm curious, in the intervening 5 years or so, how your relationship to external validation has moved, and have you found equanimity in certain ways because of how much time you spent with it? Has it slipped in some ways in the way of like taking the more paid gigs, and maybe you're making something that feels less authentic on social media? Or how is your relationship to authenticity and validation now?
Today, now it's very, very good. But like 2 months ago, like when I was at the peak worst moment before I went on the break, I think I had slipped away from where I wanted to be. I think, okay, so it actually, because I had, so a lot of my stress and pressure and burnout was coming from just the financial pressure of feeling I had to make enough money. My cost of living went higher after having a son and daycare and living in New York City and all this. So because I needed to make more money, the amount I got paid for gigs mattered so much more, which meant that my overall level, my profile level as an artist mattered so much more, which directly relates to social media. Like, okay, I know promoters are looking at how many followers I have on Instagram. I would check my engagement numbers, like on these, like, social media graphs. Like, am I getting like 1% engagement, 3% engagement? What's my engagement been over the last 30 days? It's like trending up. Like, I would get like obsessive over this stuff. Like, thinking about outcomes. And part of it was like ego validation. Like, That was part of it, but a lot of it was actually just like ruthless, like analytical validation, which is like, I know that I need to have a higher number in order to send a signal to promoters to have bigger fees. Another part of it, and I don't know how to like have this come across without, I had a management company, and I think they were a great management company, and they were doing their job as a management company, which is to like have guardrails on my project, to make sure I don't say anything that's like too out there or might make, maybe it's like a little too vulnerable or it projects a sense of weakness, I can't think of an example offhand, but I had these like guardrails from my management company, and they would never tell me no, don't say that. They would say, like maybe that's not a good idea, or maybe that's not a solid signal. And then even when they wouldn't say that, in the back of my mind, before I would draft a post or think about something in social media, I would think about what they would say or what they wouldn't like, because that might be too authentic or too vulnerable or too risky. So, okay, one, there was like the numbers and analytics validation thing. And then two, there was the actual authenticity of my message, which is there was like a chilling effect, or I started shying away from doing that stuff because strategically that might not be in my interest towards blowing up, towards becoming a superstar or sending a strong signal to promoters. So these two kind of things kind of were like bubbling up until that like burnout moment. Because I'm going to take another side thing. My opinion on social media, and I teach this to my mentees too, is that it does not have to be something where you have your artist career and then you just bolt on social media, to try and pump up what you're doing. I actually philosophically believe, for me, that social media is part of your art. As artists, we are trying to communicate an authentic slice of ourselves to the world. And music or paintings or poetry, those are just the mediums by which we're trying to communicate our idea to the world. But I think like social media could also be another one of those media to communicate that message. Now, as I started like crafting or compromising or like, neutering that message, I started feeling like out of tune with myself because I wasn't able to like share everything that I wanted, to share. And again, I'm not blaming my management company for this. I feel like they were doing their job. But when I decided to go on the break, it turns out that that was the point when my management company decided that we're no longer going to work together again, which I saw as like, I was like depressed. And actually my European booking agency, they dropped me the same day too. So I felt like my whole world.
What day was that?
This was like 2 weeks before Burning Man. So mid-August, I guess you could say. So I'm going on like a tangent here, but I'm going to come back to it. In that moment, like I felt like my whole world was crumbling. Like everything I had built, like this management company was really good. Like they dropped me, or we kind of dropped each other. We decided it doesn't make sense to move forward anymore. European booking agency, they dropped me. And I like went in this like deep depression. No, not deep depression. I mean, I was able to get out of bed. I was depressed, like certifiably depressed for a few days. And then, having time to process it, going to Burning Man, coming back from Burning Man, spending time with my family, just having space, as evidenced by my social media as of late, which, you're kind of alluding to and you've kept in mind. I feel like the shackles are kind of off in a way where I've come back to that version of myself that was maybe where we were during, Life as a Podcast V1, where I'm in this chapter where I'm not thinking about the numbers nearly as much. I still look at the numbers and it still feels good, but I'm not preoccupied with like jacking my follower count. Now I have this point of view, which is, if I say something and I lose followers, it's like, oh, well, those probably weren't the right followers for me. Great. Not great, but good. I hope your attention is directed towards something that makes more sense for you, because I'm not in this game right now. I'm going to say what I want to say, and if you're on board for it, awesome. If you're not, cool, have a nice day.
So those aren't real hot dogs.
Yeah, no, those are exactly.
Why hot dogs? Why are they hot dogs?
Such a great question.
Where does it come from? Why are they hot dogs? By the way, for the listener who is not familiar, this legion of interested parties who like your music and also the things that you share with the world, you refer to and to yourself as a hot dog.
It's true. I know the earliest documented evidence of hot dogs in my music career is a mix that I put out in 2010. It was called like November 2010 Hot Dog Mix. So there was that. But I don't know where it came from. I don't know. I think I just like wrote an email. So I had an email list of 100 friends that turned into something bigger now. And I think I just said hello hot dogs because it sounded funny. And then people replied back to me saying, hey, hot dog. And then we just all started kind of, I don't really remember, to answer your question. It just happened. And,
it's disarming. I like hot dogs. I mean, I don't eat a lot of hot dogs. I'm gluten-free. But I like your use of hot dogs because it's disarming and it's for the same. Okay, I like the submarine art car at Burning Man, and I like it because the DJ booth is lower and closer to the audience. Right? I like dance situations with less barriers,
1,000%,
where it feels like we're a family cookout kind of vibe, and someone's just dancing right next to you, and that's the vibe. I feel like referring to your fans as hot dogs kind of does something similar because it's silly and it doesn't make you seem like so many people who have followers that they've given a title to have a bit of a cult leader vibe to them, where they're like, you know, my legions of people, and I like hot dogs. I like that you've chosen that. So dear listener, you may yourself be a hot dog or be one that you are not yet familiar. You're an aspiring hot dog, tofu dog. I like that they're hot dogs. And I'm curious, did your management company like that they were hot dogs? Was it that granular where they'd be like, oh, have you considered calling them, you know?
No, I think they were like neutral to positive on it.
Okay.
We just never talked about it. It's just, that was the thing that was done.
So something about social media. When we did our interview, there was beginning to be a trend to vulnerability on social media. Like it was happening. Now much more so, especially after the pandemic, and this is so interesting for me, and you and I are similar in this way, where we are good at being vulnerable. You know, like we're skilled at being vulnerable, and being vulnerable is itself a currency, particularly for men, I've found. If you're on social media and you're sharing and you're vulnerable, then people want to connect with you and you get the likes. So you can get into a space where the vulnerability is itself something that you might be trying to optimize, and then that becomes very tricky. Have you found yourself in a space where like optimizing vulnerability for the sake of getting likes has that come up for you, where it's like curated openness and not actual vulnerability? I say it because I have at times in my life I've felt that way, where I was like, ooh, they're really going to like how vulnerable I'm being.
Great question. Let's explore it because I haven't thought about it that much. So we're going to have some stream of consciousness here. I would definitely say in the last few years, that just hasn't come up because I don't think I've been operating at peak vulnerability outwardly.
Operating at peak vulnerability. Then that's a good little subtitle.
That's the engineer in me speaking. I think when like this like last few weeks of social media where I've been more visible, more active, and more vulnerable, I think I was aware, like in my mind as I was writing it, two things were coexisting. It's like, oh, people are gonna eat this up. Like I knew that. But it's also like that's not the reason why I'm doing it. It's also like I need to say this. It was like a combination of both. Like I know this is going to land, but that's not why I'm doing it. It's part of my artistry. Like it's part of I have to communicate. You know, I have the desire to be understood. I have something to say. In this case, it's not through a DJ set or it's not through music production. It's through words or through me talking to a camera. Like that's part of my art. So I think it was both. And I think the third one, which emerged after I made the posts and maybe which encouraged me to make more posts, were the number of messages and phone calls that I received. I mean, and comments too. There were lots in the comments, but comments are great. But like when people like privately message me and they make themselves vulnerable, I feel like I was connecting with people at a very like real level. And it wasn't, and I reply to everything and I try to engage as much as I can. I wish I didn't even use the word engage. I love connecting with people who I wouldn't have otherwise connected with because of my art or because of my profile or whatever. And I saw that as such a beautiful opportunity to take this thing in social media, which so often feels fake. And especially where I was, maybe more so like the last few years. I don't think I was outright ever fake, but it is discussed as this thing that is a very fake, toxic thing. I was definitely doing a lot of success projecting. And then after this like string of posts, I started getting these messages which did a few things. One, it made me feel supported. Actually, it really, really carried me through this difficult decision I was making. Two, it made me feel connected to people, leading to like books that I might read or personal experiences or whatever. And three, I realized that I was setting an example for people, which wasn't my initial goal, but I realized like people, this feels so weird to say that, like people like look up to me.
Why does it feel weird to say that?
Because that's like I'm saying a thing that's true, but that's not like why I'm trying to do this, or it wasn't why I was trying to do it initially. It might be transitioning into one of my missions now.
Yeah, I
might be. Yeah,
I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I do want to touch on that because it's like, why do we need to shy away from saying that people might look up to us? So, like for me, for example, and I don't have, and I don't. The numbers are not that important to me. I intentionally work on them not being important to me. I know that I affect certain people because they send me messages and say that this show has helped them in certain ways. And for me, I have a way of being with that where, yes, it affects my ego and I'm like, I'm a good boy. I did good. But there's also this sort of thing of like, we're all rising together. We're all blooming together. There's actually, as you're saying, there's a connection and an evolving. And I like to think of it as modeling what I want to see in the world, what I want to be in the world.
You hit it. Yeah. I think like a core part of my project is becoming the example of the world that I would like to live in. So if it's people like, yeah, maybe part of it is people juicing social media for like vulnerability likes. Okay, like maybe that's happening. I guess there's a question to explore, like, is that so bad? If it's real, I guess it's a good thing. But that can also coexist with people getting more in tune with their feelings or talking about how they feel. And especially in the South Asian community, I received quite a number of messages from South Asian men and Middle Eastern men saying, like, in our culture, it's really like just even saying that you're seeing a therapist, Indian culture, like oh, there's something wrong with you if you're seeing a therapist or blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't even have to go on these long spiels talking about all my deep emotions. Just me mentioning I see a therapist in passing is already setting a big example for our community and undoing generational trauma or immigrant kind of thing. So I'm kind of like growing into it a little bit.
I encourage you to own it. I encourage you to own it because, and maybe the language of being looked up to, maybe that's not exactly the right language because it does imply a certain differential.
That's why it feels weird. I think. Yeah.
So let's use better language for it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there's any reason for you to reject or to try to like inject a certain kind of false humility it's not false humility, but to try to like make yourself small in the context of what you have to give. What I like to think about is like, yes, we know that making someone feel small so you can feel big sucks. But making yourself small so others can feel big also sucks. The best, in my opinion, is to be big, be you, be your unique individuation of the divine in all your splendor, knowing you are no better than anyone else. You're no more special than anyone else, but you're expansion and expression and blossoming is there in part to encourage that in other people.
This is excellent, Eamon, and this podcast in this moment right now is part of my personal work and what
I know.
I'm serving. So
that's why I'm here.
So thank
that's
you.
Why
for
I came
that.
here. So we can be big. So we can be big together. And that's why, you know, as we're having this conversation, I'm constantly checking in, thinking about who's the young Indian man who wants to be a DJ listening to this right now. Who's that guy? He's there. He's listening. You know, who is the Persian woman who is like, she's been DJing a little bit and it's not working for her, or she's been painting, or like whatever it is. These different people on these different stages of their journeys, and to hear someone, to me the vulnerability is the authentic and open sourced grappling with the challenge, so that people can check in and listen to you and first of all feel inspired, like, okay, I can grapple with that too. And also hear little tidbits of like, oh, okay, so you're taking a break from touring, that's the problem, but that's actually making more space for, say, producing or mentoring or whatever. So like, what we're doing in this moment, of course, this is part of your thing. I'm here to help you do your thing. And I'm also here doing my thing. And that, I think, that's the kind of authenticity that that matters most to me, and that's the authenticity that I aspire to continue to be present for. And I think for you right now, and we're kind of naturally coming into a moment in the conversation of like blue skying what can be, you know, because you made a comment about like, oh, well, career, my relationship to career, you mean music or... So let's go with a bit of music, or this is part of your art. Your presentation on social media is part of your art. Your 2015 What Sucked About Burning Man, which I loved, still love, part of your art. What are some ways that you want to express art and express yourself in the world right now that aren't in the realm of music during this break? Or what are you exploring? What might be something that you offer the world?
There's like two flavors in that one. There's like, what are you exploring that might be an offering to the world? I'm trying to like, I'm taking great pleasure and great pride. This is my like maybe non-answer in exploring things without them necessarily with them having to be attached to how the world sees it.
Great.
Skateboarding. We're gonna talk about skateboarding.
I have it in my notes.
It's a big part of my life right now. I'm 41 years old. I stepped on a skateboard for the first time 4 or 5 months ago. Very old. 40 years old is a very old age to start skateboarding. And I took it up because we put my son in skateboarding. But anyway, I'm gonna get to the point quickly because I don't want to talk about ollies and kickflips. I am horrible at skateboarding. I'm really bad at it. And I am very likely never going to make a career out of this. And I know it's something that like my audience like really doesn't care about. I love that. Sometimes I post a story here or there, which is great because people give me tips on my forum, but that is not the purpose of my journey to do something with skateboard. It is so not attached to outcomes that I am able to just be present with it and fall in love with it, which is like where I wish I was with music a few months ago. So it's kind of setting an example for myself to not be outcome driven. Similarly with improv comedy, I'm taking these improv classes for personal work, for development, but I do love comedy, and this might be a hobby of mine that like I'm probably not going to be an actor at some point. So the first half of my non-answer is I'm actually like really consciously trying to make space for things that I just want to do for myself that are not like world facing. But the elephant in the room is I really have to start thinking about like what is my contribution to the world, especially how is that going to make money. Software is like bouncing around in my head. I have like a startup idea. It's like a music industry. I know.
If you don't like stress, then
I know that's the problem. It's like I want a job now to make money so I can focus on art, and I have this like startup idea that I think is going to make a lot of money. That is definitely not the right thing, but it's in my head. It's in my head. The coaching thing, maybe like dialing that up. I'm like kind of getting into like the nonprofit space a little bit with I'm brainstorming starting a record label for South Asians, having a space for us to do that. That is something I'm probably going to present to the world, but is not going to make any money. And that's about where I'm at right now. I don't really know.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you've just started the break.
I'm exploring stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, being in explore mode is awesome. I want to talk just a little bit more about the South Asian community, and because this is twice just now that your relationship to the South Asian community has come up. That seems to be a little bit mission oriented for you. Has that always been the case, or what is your relationship to that community?
No, it hasn't been my mission, and it's quickly becoming my mission.
Just over the podcast.
Yeah.
We started at skateboarding, and now all of a sudden.
Yeah. Actually, like 2 or 3 years ago, I did, it wasn't a podcast, it was like a seminar, very similar to this. And a South Asian host, Ashu from San Francisco, he asked me, what is my relation in my artistry to my South Asianness? And the answer I gave at the time was, I don't hide from being South Asian. It happens to be part of my identity. And I'm going to do what I do. I'm not going to shy away from being South Asian, but it's not my mission to be a leader for South Asians. But I do know South Asians look up to me, and that's a privilege, and it feels great. That's like where I was like 2 years ago. And where I am now, I am feeling a calling to create a space for us to be South Asian. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like dungi dangi, like Bollywood sounds or doubles or sitars, but for us to be South Asian in whatever and express our South Asianness in ways that might not obviously be South Asian. I'm just going to come around to this. I had one release that came out in April and another release that's coming out in November on Damien Lazarus's label. And 2 of those songs have like samples from like old Bollywood. And I think that's what's been the catalyst where I've like really, really been thinking about my identity as an artist, which is like, I never sampled Bollywood or doubles or sitars before, and I'm doing this now. And part of me is like, I've been like afraid of being like exotified. Like I played a gig in like Paris, like in 2017, 18, where they put like Atish in this big cheesy ass Indian, like Hindi looking font. And I'm just like, that feels cheap. So I think I've like shied away from that, but now I'm just like kind of like owning it with these 2 releases. And I'm like, those releases, they have South Asian samples. People can pigeonhole me or not. And this is also me kind of like owning myself with like my Instagram following. People can pigeonhole me. They can exotify me. They can like do whatever they want. But ultimately, it's up to me to decide what I'm presenting to the world. I've like come to this thing where what is South Asian music? What is South Asian art? South Asian music, South Asian art is anything that is created by a South Asian. Period. And I don't think that's something that all of us South Asians necessarily understand. I think these 2 releases that have come out would really force me to confront how I see my own South Asianness in the world. And these insecurities that I have are insecurities that so many others have. And I realized like actually there are not many spaces for us to explore different dimensions of our South Asianness, whether or not it has the ding dong Bollywood or tablas, or it's just straight dark room banging techno, with synthesizers. So yeah, this is part of my journey. And I have the space right now to think about this stuff. What does it mean to be South Asian? What does it mean to make South Asian art?
Well, part of my personal desire in having this conversation with you today was to actually be brainstorming some of this stuff with you.
Okay, cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's for our audience and for you as my friend and for me, we're the same age and thinking about where we want to put our time and who we want to be. And I think I did. It's interesting how podcast themes kind of like flow. I did a podcast with my mentor Chip Conley, who came out with a book about midlife recently, and I did a podcast and in advance of that, he's like, well, you're approaching midlife. And I was like, no, I'm not, but I am. And that's okay. And actually, that's good. There's an order of things. And I think for folks our age, beginning to think about like, what kind of example are we setting? What kind of model are we being? How are we creating space for younger people to come in and have the fun adventures we've had and the creative opportunities we've had?
1,000%, Eamon. the word that's been like bubbling up in this space I've had is like, what is my legacy? I'm a 41-year-old DJ who has one kid, and we're talking about having a second one. I'm not gonna be the globetrotter or whatever. I've kind of like let that go, and I've maybe done a little grieving around that too. That's where the tears were, kind of grieving that. So now I'm just thinking about, and I'm glad you mentioned the thing before about, being an example with, vulnerability and openness. Like, actually, what is the legacy I want to leave for my career? At this point, it's not like chart topping or like festival headline gigs. It's maybe now I would have more pride in saying that my career paved the path that opened the door for another South Asian who wasn't sure how to confront their feelings or communicate their feelings through art or see a therapist or do this kind of thing. Or, my legacy is being a great father to my son. Like my legacy is passed to my children, or child right now. So yeah, that's a word that like bubbles up a lot, I think, as I get older, which is what's the way that I want to leave my mark for other people and make the world a better place than it was before. Because nightlife and drug trips and DJ sets are they're all temporary and they're a thrill in the moment. But yeah, I guess I'm like searching for something like a bigger thing that I can leave on the world, bigger than myself.
It's interesting. We both lived for a time in San Francisco, which is very known as a land of Peter Pan men. And for me, I was gallivanting around the world, going to festivals and writing about them in my 30s. And there's a certain sort of like, what does growing up mean in 2024? What does it mean to be a grown up? And to take responsibility as an adult, and what do we sacrifice? What do we grow out of when we step into the community of responsible adults, where when something goes down and it's like, hey, we need help, you go towards it instead of going to go find the help because you're the help, because you're a fucking adult.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And by that, I don't just mean like in a physical situation of someone who's harmed, but like as we're tackling the problems that we see in the world, as we're thinking there's legacy in relation to like, what do I want to leave behind? And there's also like, shit is fucked up and we do need role models. And I think as men, there's a thing with masculinity too. And something I really appreciate about you is like, what kind of example are we setting to allow men to be better leaders and helpers and role models as well from our experiences in nightlife? And not just nightlife, that's a funny word for it, but like the experience of personal exploration in the context of music and psychedelics and festivals and that sort of thing. Like that's been a space that's really nurtured us, and we've supported others in that. How does that evolve as we get older? Yeah. And that's a question that I'm sure is in some form or another going to be on your mind during this break, because you're going to be choosing what you're investing your life force in and how you're going to be making money. And so and I'm in a similar place too in terms of writing this book, and my podcast is like, how can we be helpful? That's so important.
I think we're totally on the same page. And I feel like, 101, like the simple thing, which I'm like really getting deep in doing work on right now. And I was thinking about this quite a bit when I was at Burning Man, is like, to me right now, it's so obvious that being in tune with my feelings is making my life so much better in so many different ways. It's also making things uncomfortable because I'm not blocking the way. But okay, wow, I'm like really in tune with my feelings, and I'm making amazing music artistically. I'm satisfied. I don't care about external validation. But like all these things are so amazing, getting to my feelings. This is like a concept I'm taking for granted right now, which within the world of like masculinity, let's say default masculinity, something that so many of us see as a simple thing is so far removed from, I don't know what the right term is, from default masculinity, being in touch with our feelings or expressing our feelings. A lot of the thing I was having was like, well, maybe that's where I start. Just like talking about how it's not just okay, it's important for us to reflect on how we feel.
That's not where you start. I mean, you've been doing this for a while, so you're in it.
No,
you're fully in it.
I mean, in my journey, and like, where do I start? And like, what I talk about. Okay, there's like therapists or this, but like, I feel it's like a low hanging fruit as like a thing to discuss. Like, guys, everybody, but guys, like, we need to talk about our feelings here. And I think like maybe an older version of myself, before I was so in tune with myself, I think it's hard because there's a barrier, because I think once people who how do you get people to want to hear that message? I'm trying to figure out maybe a subversive way to get that message to people, because someone might just swipe up right when they say, "Oh, feelings."
Well, look, I think I have spent a lot of time on this subject matter, and the thing is that if we're talking, and giving the caveat that we're talking about sort of a heteronormative like masculinity that is so we're not talking about any kind of universal masculinity, but there's a certain kind of traditional heteronormative masculinity,
totally.
And a lot of men want similar things. They want success. They want to be attractive to women. They want to be cared about by their peers. And I think that you as a DJ and you as an artist, you have things that people want. A successful career. You have things that people are kind of listening to. And so I don't think it's sort of like, hi, I'm a guy and you should care about your feelings.
Yeah.
But it's more sort of like, what do you want? How do you get it? And how do you allow your desires and wants to evolve through your experience? That's kind of been what I've been focusing on with people. So like, particularly, I love talking to men about talking to women. I love talking to men about talking to women, because it turns out that our instincts are typically not correct when it comes to talking to women. And that actually these very things, like being in therapy and being emotionally literate, and most above all, helping women to feel safe, actually gives you more opportunities to connect than being a tough guy who is wearing the right clothes and who is projecting a certain thing. So, let me wind back to how the question of like how we access. I mean, we access through the fact that like, that there are young South Indian men who see you as an example of someone who didn't have to be a doctor they didn't want to be, who has a great relationship, a child who's a fucking DJ making cool music, who is on other cool DJs' labels, who is going to these different parties. They see that, and you're someone who goes to therapy, and you're someone who's willing to talk about this. I think that's enough.
Yeah, as you were saying that, and this is actually like a therapy session, as I was saying it out
Always
loud.
is.
Yeah, as I was saying it out loud, I realized, I don't need to like think about this too much. I'm actually already doing the work.
You're doing it.
With that note that I posted or talking. Yeah. So cool.
With this podcast right now, you're literally, this is the work. Yeah.
Of
course.
So I guess I'll just stay in this zone and just keep doing it because it feels right to me.
Something I'm interested in, just it's so fun how these podcasts go, and there's certain things that I'm like, I'm really interested in this. Your relationship to the South Asian community is super interesting to me, especially as that's been an evolving thing. I'm curious, are you connected with the South Asian community in New York, in like physical sort of like where that community is vibing here? Because that might be an access point for you too, especially when we talk about social media and communication and validation. These in-person ways of connecting, I'm curious like what sort of groups or communities of South Asians are in New York City, obviously tons, and maybe there's an access point for you to connect with young people, mentor. Yeah, it seems interesting.
It's a great question, and I am plugged in through through a few different channels, to the extent that I can be socially, because it's hard to be out and about when having a kid. One is through the nightlife scene. There's kind of a group of us South Asians. One of the guys who runs Indo Warehouse, one of the founders of Brooklyn Mirage, me, and a couple other like DJs and producers, and we just have these, we call them brown dinners. Every 2 months we just get together and we just talk about our perspective on life and what's happening in music. My wife, she's a South Asian actress, and she takes me out to a lot of South Asian theater, and she has a community of South Asian artists. So I feel like I'm like a little bit plugged into what's happening there. But there's probably room to like explore this. I mean, there's definitely, you're nodding, there's like definitely room to
it sounds like it's important to you.
It's becoming more and more important.
It sounds like it's important to you. And what sounds like it's important to you specifically is like, hey, I have directly related to my mental health. I have directly related to my anxiety. We did a whole podcast on it. I have a therapist and it is working. Hey, guys, Try this. Trust me. Try this. That's fucking legacy. That's a vibe. So, I'm not pushing you, but it seems like there's a trend in that direction, and I find it very, very inspiring.
Yeah, you're right. And there is like more to explore. And part of the reason why I also want to start this label, which is a space for South Asians, is to, I don't know, I'm a builder, and I'm also a leader. So there's room for me to connect with other spaces, but also create the space for the thing that I want to exist too. A label exists in the digital space, but I also think about how can I have that exist in a physical space as well to bring people together.
So you're on a journey, and you are going to be chronicling that, I presume, through primarily your Instagram. For people who are listening to this show right now and want to know how this all shakes out, people who are going to be a little sad that they're not getting to see you tour, but are very likely on your side and being like, yeah, take your break, do your thing. But they want to know, where are they following you? Where should people be checking in with you and your work?
Yeah, I think Instagram seems to be the default, Atish Music. And I have my email list, my hot dogs list. And that's usually...
how do you sign up to the hot dogs?
You could go to bit.ly/Atish Music.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. Or you could just go to atishmusic.com and there's a link there. I like email as a medium, even though it's very, very outdated. Or not outdated, even though it's very old. I feel like it's this place that really enables more long-form communication. I mean, hence the rise of Substack. So if you really, really want to know me, there's a lot more intimate communication in my email. Although I'm about to contradict myself because I'm getting more and more comfortable with intimate communication on Instagram. I'm rambling. Instagram, email, check me out there.
Cool. And I think that, considering everything we've discussed today, I'm going to double tap on people reaching out to you.
Okay.
Yeah, because I feel like,
please.
I mean, we're literally discussing our hypothetical listeners who I know are there right now. You right now who are listening, who feel the way you feel and want to feel the connection of being able to tell you that.
Please do. I read and respond to every single message. I might not respond immediately, but yeah, feel free to reach out, connect with me. I read and respond to everything.
Cool. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
I think you are setting an example. I think you are. And part of why I wanted to talk to you today is like, taking a strategic mental health break. Smart. Let's talk about that. And you did not disappoint, as I knew you would not. I love being able to have this level of openness and deep dives with you.
Me too. Since I went on, the thing, I announced the break a couple weeks ago. I've had this in my mind. It's like I should put a piece of content out there or something that says just like a check in with everyone on like how I'm doing in more detail. And actually, it's this. So thank you for that. Thank you for.
I saw it. And I was like, I feel like you need this. So with that in mind, you wanted to release a piece of content, and I think we've really thoroughly excavated a lot of aspects of this. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you want the people who've been following your artistic journey to be aware of?
No, I think this pretty well encumbered it. I don't have anything to promote right now, which feels great. I mean, if you're in Ibiza, come next week. But
I do have listeners in Ibiza.
Oh, okay. Well, Ibiza people come next week.
There's actually a full Ibiza contingent of Life as a Festival followers.
All right. Well, my label's doing a party at Akasha next Friday. But beyond that, I feel like I spoke to the depths of where I am artistically right now, and yeah. We covered it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me in your home. Such a pleasure to catch up with you. And I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I really feel like you continue to be on the forefront of relating to some of these big themes around external validation, authenticity, around leadership. Like, these are all things that really matter to me. And so it's so nice to tap in with you. And I really appreciate the example you're setting.
Thanks, Eamon.